So the final design pack is the pinnacle of the garden design process. This is where your client gets to see a culmination of all that work you've put in, a concept, some great visuals, as well as a roadmap of how they're going to build it. The final design pack is indeed a document for two sets of people. First, you've got your clients and you've got a great set of drawings, hopefully some really good visuals, as well as a specification. This is so they know what they're going to get. Then we've got the documents which really are tailored towards the landscaper or the builder who are going to be building the garden. Construction drawings, detailing, levels, etc. This is a set of drawings which allows the guys to build the garden without too much head scratching or time wasting on site, looking at different levels or measurements which have already been worked out at this early stage. Now, if you saw my last video, you'll remember that I suggested that I was going to split this video into two halves, but actually I've decided we're going to go whole hog and we're actually going to do it all in one. Don't worry, I'm going to be breaking down a lot of the individual elements within separate videos later on down the line, but I really wanted to finish this series with a whistle-stop tour of the final design pack. And at the end of this video, I'm going to be giving you some quick fire tips as to how we can make sure that our garden's built properly and is a real success both for the client and for the landscaper. But more on that later. So whenever I do any final design pack, it always consists of an absolute minimum of 4 key documents. The presentation plan, the construction layout plan, the planting plan and the specification. We then also need to include any project specific documents. We're talking lighting plans, construction detailing maybe, even a maintenance plan for after the garden's built. So we've pretty much done this one already. However, this is your last chance to make any slight changes or tweaks that might make this document really sing. So this was one I did for a client a year or so ago, and as you can see there's quite a bit of information there, especially on the two-dimensional plan, but really at this stage it's all about the visuals. Note that at this stage I am using photorealistic images of the plan, and this is just to give them a really good idea of what their new garden's going to look like. Some designers also do things like animated flyovers of the garden or walkthroughs. This can work really well as well. However, what I would say is with both these options we do need to be a little bit careful to manage our clients' expectations. I would highlight that the planting within these images tends to be what I expect it would look like when the garden's fully established, not necessarily how it's going to look day one when the landscape is set off site. The construction layout plan is the main document any builder or landscaper is going to use, so we need to make sure that this is absolutely correct. It's going to be really critical to the success of your garden. Okay, so here's a construction drawing I did for the same garden as we looked at a moment ago. You'll note that as well as measurements and levels, I've also put notes on there to draw their attention to certain aspects and material choices that might help. For example, I referenced the built-in kitchen there and another drawing within the pack so that they know to look out for that when they're up to this bit. One of the challenges here is to get the right amount of information on the drawing. I've worked with some designers who literally expect you to use a scale rule the whole time, which can be a little bit risky if you're going to work on a 1:50 scale or more. Your pen line's going to need to be pretty accurate at that point. Other designers who literally put every single measurement on the drawing, which can lead to confusion and sometimes mistakes between measurements. I've only included measurements on this plan that I think are vital, such as the patio. This was because we needed to fit the pergola in with just 100mm on the outside of the feet, and the kitchen was also very specific in its sizing. The flower beds between the pathways, well, if they were 900 or 950 or 850, it didn't really make too much difference. And to be quite honest, if I did my survey and the outline master plan correctly, it shouldn't really have too much more variation than that. Now there's a few different ways we can go about this, and I tend to switch depending on the client. If your customer is the sort of person who knows that you're going to do a good job, trusts you, perhaps doesn't know that much about plants, then we can potentially keep it quite simple. In that case, I create a document like this which lists the plants in each area. It doesn't tell the client how many there are or give exact locations, but it allows the customer to look up the names and see whether or not they like them.
This is really only possible if you're going to be doing planting yourself or happy to do a planting layout separately, but it does then allow a lot more freedom when it comes to being on site and positioning plants as you think works best. You can play around with the combinations, really tailor the plants to the landscape around them. So here we have a much more traditional style planting plan. This one numbers the plants, it specifies the layout, and this means that another landscaper or even the client can plant up the garden and you know it's going to work. This is also a lot easier to quote from, as it also specifies exact numbers of plants. We can even go further and put sizes down there as well if we really wanted to. This is without a doubt the correct way technically to create a planting plan, but if you're like me and like the flexibility of the first one, it can be a little bit more appealing with a client that just wants a great looking garden, as then we get to play around a lot more on site. But equally, there's no reason why you can't do that with a more detailed planting plan, so long as you talk to the client first and explain that's how it's going to work.
That's the final specification. Now, I don't know if you remember in the outline master plan, but we did a specification that was really tailored towards the customer or the client.
Now we can build on this and certainly add a lot more information to it. We can refer back to construction details, etc. But this would only be okay for a relatively simple garden where we were sure we could get every last bit of information in there, or if we were building it ourselves and we knew we were going to follow best practice. Otherwise, I tend to use this one. The headers specification. Now, this is available from the Society of Garden Designers. It's written and intended for garden designers, and it lists all best practices for standard elements within the garden, as well as things like tender details, stage payments, etc. And by using this, you can also ensure that everyone is quoting on a level playing field. Again, this is probably the right answer when it comes to the specification. You can write your own version if you feel the garden's simple enough, or you're confident you can get enough information in there.
And there's the 4 documents that you absolutely need to include within your final design pack. However, there's a few more that I tend to do that I think you should really consider. Construction details, for example. Now, it's pretty rare that I design a garden where there isn't some sort of detail that really needs a little bit more explanation.
It could just be a set of steps, simple enough. But don't forget you want the steps to be the same height. There needs to be enough fall so that the water shed off them easily. What about the size of the nose, or whether you want the riser flush with the tread? And then there's the concrete, so they don't collapse after a few years of heavy use.
Now, I did that construction detail a few years ago using SketchUp. However, I found it was a little bit confusing for a couple of the guys, and so I reverted back to the good old-fashioned pen and paper. But you know, whatever works best for you.
This is a fairly recent one I did for an off-the-shelf fireplace we imported. Hopefully it's simple enough for you to understand how it works straight away. But they do get an awful lot more complex than this. This is a construction drawing for the roof at the Cancer Research UK garden we built over at the RHS Tatton Park Flower Show. I designed this in 2021. Believe it or not, there were in fact 4 drawings just for the roof, and this was just one of them. I could get so geeky about construction drawings, I tell you.
The next video series I'm going to be doing is going to be all about construction detailing. There's going to be loads of examples of construction plans, so if that's something that you're interested in, don't forget to subscribe, and that will definitely help you along the way. Now, the last plan I'm going to talk about is the lighting design. It's pretty rare that one of our gardens doesn't have some sort of lighting in it nowadays, and lighting design is an industry in itself. However, if like us, you tend to find that most of your clients just want a bit of lighting to complement the garden, to extend their use into the evenings, you might find that actually you can create something simple enough, and we quite often draw this out with a little bit of help from some of the suppliers that we use, so that we can ensure that we get the effects that we really want.
This is a lighting plan I did for last year for a client who was having their garden built by the builder. They brought in their own electrician to do his part. Now, I like to keep these plans simple. After all, I'm not an electrical engineer, and I need to be careful to allow the electrician to do what they think is correct and not tie their hands and state that they should do something that might potentially breach regulations. So really, this is about showing the type of light and its location. I also specify the switching, i.e. channel 1 does the water feature, channel 2 does the trees, etc, etc. And I think as a designer this really is enough. On this particular plan, I also noted the mains wiring layout as the builder needed to put trunking in before he laid the paving. However, before I did anything, I did send this over as a draft to the electrician for their approval before I finalised the plans and submitted them.
And there we have it, the final design pack is complete. It might feel like a marathon, But a lot of these bits and pieces should have been considered at earlier stages, so hopefully it's not been too bad. And to be fair, if you charge the right fees, then your time is paid for appropriately, and so you should have the time in order to do this. As you'd perhaps expect, I am going to be doing a video all about fees and how to charge for garden design, so again, do stay tuned. Now, at the beginning of the video, I promised you a few quick-fire tips so that we can ensure that our garden that we've spent all that time designing is going to have the perfect end result that's going to get you lots of referrals and lots of new work from all their friends and family. So here we go. Number one, first of all, you've been spending a lot of time on this design, and so you're very, very close to it. You need to pressure test this design. Ideally, with somebody who knows a little bit about construction. I tend to pass on all my designs to our construction manager first. He will then go through and just check and see if he understands everything and that he can clearly see a roadmap there as to how to build everything. Appreciate you might not have your own construction manager, so hopefully you've made a good contact with somebody like a landscaper or a builder, where you might just be able to buy them a few beers at the pub and just pass some of the plans across and just see if they can understand the direction that you're going in with this. Number two, I would suggest that when you hand over your plans, you suggest to your client that you meet the landscaper on site before they break ground. You might even want to try and book in 2 or 3 visits along the process so that you can meet up and see how they're getting on. Again, we're just trying to ensure that things don't go off down an avenue which perhaps due to a little bit of confusion, whether it be their end or yours. But to be able to go through that with the landscaper when they first hit site is an absolute must, because that way you can talk your way through the design. If they've got any questions or if they're not sure of anything, that's the time to tackle it, not halfway through. Number 3, try and be involved in the planting. I know a lot of garden designers who make sure that they're involved, very heavily involved right from the outset, whether or not they supply the plants or whether they're just there to plant them. Don't forget that the planting is really what's going to make or break your garden in the long run, and it's going to be what ensures that the finish that they see now is only going to get better. Even if you're not able to do the planting yourself, I would suggest it's worth trying to get on site and set out the plants when they arrive so you can ensure correct spacing, that the combinations are right. You might even want to tweak some of those combinations very slightly as well. This is the perfect time to do that. And finally, number 4 is a good maintenance plan. A garden is only as good, or in the long run is only going to be as good as it is looked after. A lot of people don't understand about plants and about how they're going to look after the garden. A lot of people also employ gardeners who perhaps aren't as skilled as we perhaps like them to be. So again, it's worth talking this through with the client beforehand. How well do you understand gardening? Would you like me to incorporate a maintenance plan? Obviously you can incorporate this within your fees, or you can have it as an add-on at a later stage. That bit's up to you, but a maintenance plan is going to yet again give you that long-lasting finish. Last thing you want is for the garden to look really, really good, but then in a year's time, when they invite their friends and family over for a barbecue, somebody who knows a little bit about plants is looking around thinking, wow, really isn't that great, is it? If you get involved and if you supply them with a plan, if you try and ensure that garden is looked after, well, you're doing everything you can at that point. And that's it. The final design pack is wrapped up. Really hope you like this video and indeed this series on the very basics. In the future I'm going to be going into a lot more detail in many of these elements. So if you liked what you saw, please don't forget to subscribe. Give us a thumbs up. Any comments, any suggestions of videos that you might want to see in the future is always well received. But as I say, we're going to be talking construction details next. I know it's a subject that tends to stress many garden designers, and we've got a wealth of knowledge here to Creative Roots to be able to pass on to you. So look forward to seeing you all very soon.